Welcome back to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Connor Bronson. I'm delighted to be joined by the esteemed Gene Kim. You may have heard of him, author of the Phoenix Project, the DevOps Handbook, a new book, Wiring the Winning Organization. I just spoke with his co-author, Dr. Steve Spear, and I'm very excited to talk to Gene as well. And then he's also, of course, the program chair for IT Revolution's DevOps Enterprise Summit, founder himself. Gene, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, so good seeing you again. And by the way, I'm dying to ask, what was it like hanging out with Steve for that interview?
I love Steve. Yeah. He is such a gem. I have to say, he's got me kind of convinced on bow ties now. So it was fascinating learning about your research. It was great to just kind of chat with him. He's a really cool dude. And I can see why the two of you wrote a great book together.
Yeah, it was so cool because, the question we set out to ask was, well, let me just set the stage a little bit. So I spent, 23 years studying high-performing technology organizations. And so we know they're the organization that have the best project due date performance and development. They have the best operational reliability and stability. They have the best posture, security, and compliance. And, the state of DevOps research we identified, it has something to do with their technical practices, their architectural practices, and cultural norms. And Steven Spear, Dr. Spear, he spent 30 years studying, the Toyota production system, engine design at Pratt & Whitney, the safety culture at Alcoa.
Submarines, incredible career.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was so wonderful that when I met him 10 years ago, this quest that started to emerge was, what is in common between the Toyota production system and safety culture and DevOps and Agile and concepts like psychological safety. And it was exhilarating to see that, they are potentially all incomplete expressions of a far greater whole. And, I have to tell you, it was one of the most challenging things I've ever worked on.
Really?
There was one point in the book where, I almost quit. Just because should I tell you what?
Please, yeah, that's a great story.
So it was about a year ago, and we're just... I thought we were at a point where we were very stuck. We had a theory that we knew it had to be three things: Slowification, Simplification, and Amplification. But we couldn't come up with a simple model to really demonstrate all three principles.
It felt too hard to boil down.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so I told my wife, I'm going on a walk, and I'm not coming back until we have something. And so 6 miles later, I'm pretty convinced I'm not smart enough, that I don't understand software development enough. And I try to come up with these kind of much simpler scenarios like movie theater operations, but, realize I don't understand movie theaters well enough for that. How about restaurant operations? Like, I don't understand restaurants well enough. And, it was a very, it was a kind of a, one can imagine a sort of distressing moment where you started something 3 years ago and you might not be able to finish it.
Yeah.
Because if you can't explain it, you don't understand it. And luckily, I think that's when the notion of using this vignette that we had written, a year before around, Steve and Gene moving a couch together, could be expanded to Steve and Gene, being asked to help their spouses renovate an old hotel, right? So they have to do, remove the furniture from a room, paint the room, and bring the furniture back in.
Right.
And it was just so exciting because it's like, oh yeah, we can use that to show how even having just two functional specialties, right, doing not the most complex activity can be thoroughly screwed up, if you organize them wrong. And so it was just even more exciting when in a 30-minute call with Steve, he instantly got it, and so it was like,
that's a wonderful moment.
Yeah. So it's been such a fun adventure, and my genuine hope is that this will not just resonate with technology leaders, that they'll find something instantly familiar, right? This is a recast, like everything that we've learned over the past many decades about like how to do great software well, but it'll also resonate with manufacturing leaders, people doing bio research.
Totally.
And so I find that to be just a wonderful hope that that's going to create a common language to talk about how we talk about systems and leading systems.
Steve talked about this in a very similar way. He felt like it was a kind of culmination of this, decades of work the two of you have done. So it's very cool to hear you kind of view it similarly of like, I've had a lot of the pieces and now I have kind of this grand unifying theory of how to build high performing teams.
Yeah, no, totally. And I love this quote, anyone can make the simple be complex. It's a lot harder to take something complex and really prove to yourself that it is something simple. And so maybe I can, instead of talking in the abstract how about how we talk about it in the concrete?
Let's do it.
Yeah, there's like what essentially it's saying there's three mechanisms to create great performance, and you cannot create great performance without all three. Well,
it's much harder, at least.
Yeah, exactly. And so the first is slowification, and that word we made up because there's no word in English that we were able to find after asking GPT-4, like 100 candidates.
Yeah.
There's no word to sort of capture this concept of like slow down to speed up, or stop sawing to sharpen the saw, or slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I guess the Germans do, but
of course the Germans have a word for it.
It didn't fit on the cover.
Yeah.
So in our world, we know this as like Amazon game days, or like or chaos monkeys. To perform brilliant under in production, to be able to handle that with resilience and ease, actually takes a lot of planning and preparation. And so the classic story is in April 2011. The first AWS East outage, where essentially AWS's largest availability zone goes down. That's where they put all the customers. Most of the big customers go down, except for Netflix, which is very confusing because Netflix was running entirely in the Amazon cloud. How did they not go down?
Yeah.
And so that led to the famous Netflix blog post that described how they did it. And essentially, there's really two design decisions they revealed. One was, as they migrated out of data centers in 2009. They could have no single point of failures. And their largest single point of failure risk was AWS.
That makes sense, yeah.
And I think they even say, they will never be there when we need the most. And so that led to the development of Chaos Monkey, which randomly kills compute instances in the cloud, right? And it kills services in the middle of the day. And so developers got very good at fixing those issues. And so no wonder that when that availability zone went down, Netflix services still ran. So that's an example of slowification. You don't want to, if you're doing all your learning in production environments that have high consequence, that you can't undo actions, it's impossible to learn, right? So you have to do it in the more safer environments of, planning, preparation.
Right.
So simplification. So that first one really makes problems easier to solve. The simplification is all about how to make the problems itself simpler, so that we can solve them easier. And
same concept of mathematics, right? Where it's like, okay, this fraction is large. Let's break it down so we can make this a little easier for people.
Totally right.
Break
Let's
down.
separate like terms, and there's all these things we can do to sort of get our heads around the problem. That's a great example. I've never heard that example, but that's exactly.
You're welcome. That can be the next book.
Oh, please.
Just a little credit if you don't mind. Yeah.
And I think what's exciting about that is that in our space, what that should bring to mind is the State of DevOps research finding, where we found that one of the top predictors of performance is, to what degree can teams work independently of each other without a lot of fine-grained communication and coordination.
And not just technical architecture, but people architecture as well.
Oh, absolutely. Right, the socio-technical system, without a doubt. And so the classic example of that is in Amazon 2004. What they started off with 2 categories of products, books and music. By 2004, they have 35.
How many are we at now?
Yeah. So imagine, how difficult it was to get things done, right? If you were one of those 35 product teams, then you had to deal with the product page team, the ordering team, the shopping cart team, the returns team, right? And then you have every team connected together, and to get even small things done required a huge amount of coordination.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Werner Vogel, CTO at the time, he said, in fact, I just only learned about this quote a year ago, despite reading this paper 10 years ago. He said there was this absurd situation where Amazon Digital, so that was video and Kindle, to fulfill an order, they had to provide a physical shipping address, and there was no way around it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So they had to go to, according to this article, right? Those teams had to go to 60 different ordering teams and say, "Could you please give us an alternate, order path?" And they're like, "Didn't budget for it. You're out of luck," right? So they were stuck. And so that was the real genesis behind. Oh, and then the fact that they couldn't deploy code anymore, right? That most deployments didn't finish because something went wrong.
Bit of a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. So of course that led to the $1 billion re-architecture of Amazon into those APIs, which separated them into modules that can now work independently. They can independently develop, deploy value to customers.
That whole concept of just having APIs run everything within Amazon has really enabled them to scale like they have. And it's interesting that the first two examples you bring up are both related to Amazon because it shows the depth and the success they've had at building a very high-performing organization and scaling it across the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's two things that they did brilliantly that modularization allows. It allows the reduction of design time coupling so that those teams can do what they need to do without communicating, coordinating with the 60, 100 other, or now thousands of other
We have
teams.
an API for that.
Yeah, exactly. As long as I don't change the API, right? No, I don't need to coordinate with anybody. And then, as you mentioned, right, they reduced or eliminated runtime coupling. I can scale my service without having to scale everybody else as well. So it turns out that is that's one of the three ways you simplify systems, and there's something equivalent that you do with sequential processes, like the Toyota production system. Each one of them enable independence of action.
Dependency reduction.
Yeah. Dependency reduction, exactly. And the benefit is that I can do what I need to do without having to get permission from 35 different other people.
So creating autonomy within the organization.
Yes.
And the ability to then execute, which again, there's other research that's been shown that when someone feels like they can be impactful, they do better work too. Another indicator here.
Oh, absolutely. And it allows them to get more faster, more direct feedback on their work, right?
Great point.
Absolutely. So all those things come from modularity.
We're seeing this all add up, these little steps that then start to compound together.
Yeah.
And I know there's a third dimension as well that you mentioned.
Yeah. In fact, you know what? Maybe you just reminded me. So that linearization, right? The cousin or the orthogonal cousin of modularity is the Toyota production system, but that's also CI/CD.
Yeah.
It's like when you line up sequential activities like requirements to dev, to test, to deployment, to ops. Oh,
let's simplify the friction points all along the way.
Absolutely.
Great.
Let's tie them together, right? So that we don't do large batches and have to open up tickets. Wouldn't it be great if we could automate, linearize, and then automate those processes so that we can get single piece flow through those systems? Yeah, exactly right.
Well, I was just talking to Dr. Andre Mallerton about his book and how his viewpoint is also when we have these situations, we are freeing up cognitive load so people can do their best work. And I see that same theme in your research.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really exciting to me is that, Dr. Nicole Forsgren was here. She presented on her research. And what I love is that the concepts in Wiring the Winning Organization, they line up right with the State of DevOps Research Fund, the DOOR metrics. Because linearization is what allows us to get fast deployment lead time. Because you can't deploy within minutes or multiple deployments a day if every deployment requires threading your work through 3,500 different steps across 60 different teams, and of which maybe the testing step will take 6 weeks, right? Can't be done, right? So linearization should also be familiar to technologies.
And these are all important sub-concepts of that simplification thing you talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were mentioning the amplification, the third one.
Right.
Right. The notion is that in any system, you have to, when something goes wrong, you want to be able to generate the signal, transmit it, receive it, and then hopefully have someone react to it, right? And then solve the problem. And this should be familiar to us in technology. It should remind us of production telemetry.
Yeah.
Right. You got to see the problem.
Also continuous learning. Let's find the problem. Let's keep going on it.
Totally.
Yeah. Iteration, you're
right, because once we see a problem, we want to fix the problem.
I should hope so, yeah.
Right? We want to be able to, in any complex activity, it helps to see what's going on, right? And helps us confirm that what you actually did resolve the issue. In fact, for that matter, it also reminds me of, now that you mention it, putting developers on rotation, just like ops people, right? Because you got to share the pain, or you got to
share the learning.
Share the learning, right?
Yeah. I love it. So how should I construct my team then? How do I wire that winning organization? Great, I have these concepts. How do I apply them?
Oh yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it defies easy explanation, but I think we know when it will work and when it won't. I think if we sort of simplify it down enough. So let's take Dev and Ops. Configure it one way, where Dev does all their work and throws it over the wall to Ops. And the only way that Ops can talk to dev as if there's a live 7 outage, and you have a ticket number. And the only way that ops can talk to dev is if there's a project code. And I feel like that is just not our winning recipe, because the communication channels between dev and ops are so few and thin that it's just hopeless to transmit enough data, to get the system to work as a whole. I mean, does that resonate with you?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's plenty of research that shows that when there is high degrees of communication and feedback, the quality improves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this absolutely resonates.
Yeah, and I think the metaphor that we use for that is to try to educate leaders on that is it's like Steve and Gene moving a couch.
Right.
And it's just a metaphor for how we do joint problem solving and joint cognition. And so one might think that moving a couch is all brawn work. There's no brain work. But when Steve and Gene move a couch together, there's
How do you
actually
get it through the door.
Yeah, exactly. Where's the center of gravity? How do you get it down the stairs? Who goes first?
I was actually telling Steve when I was younger, I had to help a cousin of mine move, and we realized we couldn't get the couch out down the stairs, and we had to actually hoist it off the roof to get it out of the building. So I'm like, there's absolutely some complications that come in here.
Oh, absolutely. And as leaders, there's all these things that we can do to make it harder for Steve and Gene to move the couch.
Right.
We can put in a ticketing system. We can put in we can prevent them from talking directly to each other. We can turn off the lights, so they can't see what they're doing. We can put in a lot of background noise, right, so they can't hear each other, so they can't communicate and coordinate.
Okay, so that maybe the background noise would be inefficient systems that don't flow well, to your example earlier about CI/CD systems and trying to create this linear flow.
Oh, totally. And so, I think the reason why the first system doesn't work well, the reason why I think we were able to say, oh, that doesn't work well because dev and ops, they're trying to move a couch together, but they're not actually allowed to talk to each other.
Okay. Maybe sign language while you move the couch or something, yeah.
And so, when we do things like co-locating them together, having a liaison of ops into the dev teams, and vice versa, these are now much closer to Steve and Gene moving a couch together,
right?
Because there's actually joint problem solving going on. How am I doing? Does that resonate with you?
No, that definitely resonates, and it reminds me of an example Steve gave about Toyota and their efforts to ensure that they simplify as much as possible so that individual workers on a production line can focus their energies on key tasks instead of worrying about these other contextual pieces that's like, hey, we've already figured the context, we've figured out the flow, let's free you up to do what you do best. And I think it's the same thing whether you're a writer, whether you're an engineer. It's like, okay, let's make the systems that work for you as easy as possible. Some people mention AI here. I'll throw it in as a buzzword. Got to do it once in the talk. And then we're going to free you up to focus on what you're most creative at, what your problem solving, your strategy, these things that give you depth. And as a leader, that this really speaks to is like, so much of your focus should be, how do I make it easier for and resonant for everyone around me to do their job, to feel passion and to go deliver.
That is amazing. I double, triple underscore that. What I learned in this book is that the job of the leader is to ensure that everyone can do their work easily and well.
Yeah.
And you can thoroughly screw that up by not having enough time slack in the system, because that means you're not slowifying. Every mistake is being made in production when you can't learn. Or you've organized a system so that no one can move a couch together.
Yeah.
Or maybe to get things done, you have to open up tickets with 35 different teams. That is the opposite of easy and well. Or if you create a system that somehow suppresses or extinguishes entirely important signals, like weak failure signals, right, as opposed to amplifying them and acting on them directly. So I found that to be very satisfying. I love the way you phrase that.
Honestly, I take a lot of inspiration just from what I've read of your book so far and my interview with Steve, of this conversation around social circuitry and the idea of how do we program the society we live in, and particularly like our organization, to work better. And I think it's such an impactful concept. I already told my producers I'm going to be repeating this for the next year. They're going to get tired of me hearing me say it.
And it's so difficult to argue against. And what I'm hoping that people reading the book, will give them a language to be able to say, no, my leadership has not made it easy for me to do my work easily and well. And there's got to be, it's either one of three things has gone wrong. And what I hope it gives leaders is, especially ones that come from a technology background or are engineers, the same theories and intuitions and experience that helped us build great technical systems are actually perfect for us to think about, the socio part of the socio-technical system.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So system design, either way, like architecture design, but also applying that same thinking, breaking things down into components. Again, understanding that we try to simplify, amplify the key pieces so people can spend more time on key tasks versus less time in, status meetings, for example.
100%. In fact, can I
Please.
divide that up?
Yeah.
So I love the way you talk through that, like an architect, right? When Steve and Gene are moving a couch together, they are coupled, right? What affects Gene affects Steve, vice versa. But it means that they are coupled together, and there are times when we want lots of coupling, like when we want dev and ops pairing together, because you want that incredible flow of information to be as wide and fast as possible.
Yeah.
The problem is that in order to make a change involves both Steve and Gene, right? So that's great, but it can get to a point where you have 35. Imagine a couch that 35 people are attached to, and none of the 35 can do anything, and they've lost independence of action.
That's the autonomy piece we kind of alluded to earlier.
So maybe it's time to divide up the couch, right, without destroying it, right, but somehow re-architect it so that maybe it's 35 smaller couches. And what are the pieces that can actually be done independently of each other? And the benefit of that is independence of action. So the other thing that we can get wrong, what we got wrong in that part is that when we are overly coupled to the organization, not only does anyone have independence of action, but we waste a lot of time. You're listening to things that have nothing relevant to you. Small things require, vast amounts of effort.
Yeah.
To get everyone's permission, and then it's not just to get permission. You have to schedule together, prioritize together. Worst case, deploy together.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can probably see me shaking my head right now, thinking of some examples of when I've dealt with similar concepts before. This is really wonderful. I love the way you have broken this down into these like simple explanations that then build outwards into real life scenarios people are dealing with. Are there other key concepts from the book that you want to highlight for our audience?
I have a super funny example that actually a group of people came up with that I just fell in love with. Imagine a fictitious telco that the most important thing that they could do is just present a checkbox to the 30 million customers that would allow them to opt in to like a $5 a month service for email, watch movies, etc. The problem is that it has to cross 40 different teams across 4 different customer channels: digital, store, support, billing, etc. And it will require CEO -1 support. It requires daily war room meetings, and it will take about 9 months. Estimate is about $20 million. And most people think it will have a 20% chance of success. Why? Because it didn't work the last 2 times we tried it.
Doesn't sound ideal. Like the nice concept, but yeah, okay.
And what's awesome about this example is that it's not because it's technically challenging, right? It's because somehow the organization is wired wrong to make it almost impossible to get this work done.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's just a great example of, it just so vividly shows how we can easily create systems where to get small things done require like superheroic efforts because the coordination cost is so high.
And these coordination costs often become even more and more impactful as organizations scale too, because when you're a startup, maybe you're 20 people working in the one office together. You're all fired up about the idea. You're passionate. It's easier to ignore these coordination costs because it's a smaller group. There's less people you have to talk to. But as organizations start to grow, it's so crucial that you think about these concepts and ensure you're being intentional about them, because I don't know, by that like 100-person mark, can definitely be on once you're getting into thousands. There can be such a tax on coordination within your organization if you're not careful.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the more moving parts of the book was showing the examples outside of technology. There was a section that Steve wrote about how when one of his daughters was 6 years old and got in an accident on the playground, had to go to the hospital. And so they show up into the ER, and it takes hours to get through the paperwork. it takes hours to get the X-ray done. They show up, and it turns out they initially were going to X-ray the wrong arm.
Oh no!
And they because of a supply chain problem, they can't get a fiberglass cast. Instead, it has to be a plaster cast, which you have to keep dry. And to make the follow-up appointment, they had to call an outside line, which they had to find on their own, right? And so this was an example of like a miswired ER, and it reminded me, and I wrote right after that when my dad had a stroke, it was something very similar. I was met with the neurologist just to try to get an understanding of like what was happening. And so when he got moved out of the intensive care unit, they did the rounds. So this is the physicians, the specialists, the nursing staff, the social worker, and they're trying to make a decision about like should we put him on blood thinners or not. And they couldn't make a decision until they got the MRI images. And so I said, is it this image? And I showed the image I took the previous night. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's very helpful. And they decided to put them on blood thinners right away. But it was just another example where people didn't have what they needed at the right time.
Systems issues,
yeah,
it seems like.
And it's not a technical issue so much as the organization was miswired to get the right information to the right people.
And that must be such a challenge in healthcare in particular because, I mean, your decisions can affect lives so deeply, and so I'm sure the idea is, we want to make sure we don't make mistakes. And there's also, of course, massive issues with we're going to get sued for this malpractice, but because that I'm sure has seeped into the entire ethos of the system, other pieces of organizational design that could ease up the friction points so that people can focus on those key decisions. Like it sounds like those are breaking down.
Can I offer you a less generous interpretation?
Sure.
That this is actually a DevOps problem in a different context.
Okay.
In other words, what would happen if to change a medication on a patient bedside required going up 8 levels in the nursing chain and then down 8 to pharmacy?
Probably never change the medication, that's for sure.
Or like to change the type of gloves used has to go up 8 levels to chief operating officer and then down 8 levels to supply chain. So it reminds me so much of like, in order to dev to get important information to ops, they have to escalate through the VP of development to the CIO, down to the VP of operations, down to a line ops person.
Or I'm getting a headache thinking about this. Yeah.
So it is eerily similar, right? And so yes, everything that you said is true, but in no way I would say excuses that the healthcare leader from allowing people to do their work easily and well. And I think we've sort of helped create this incredible body of knowledge in the DevOps community, but you could take those same concepts, apply them to so many different domains that we talk about in the book. And to me, that's just so satisfying that in so many ways, DevOps is leading the way. And my hope is that through the book, other domains will see how those same principles and patterns can be applied to their work as well. And in many cases, in situations where it really matters.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a bit about those principles because, we're here at DevOps Enterprise Summit in Las Vegas, the center of so much information and research. Dora's report, which just came out today, which LinearB is proud to partner with, is one great one. We just put out our benchmarks report and Nicole Forsgren's work at GitHub and Microsoft, some really fascinating signal. Sonatype's got a new report out. All this incredible data and information is coming out. What are the trends and extensions of the DevOps spirit and the improvements that you see coming over the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's such a fun time to be in the game. Hey, we got to throw in some AI in there, right?
Sorry. Second mention. Yeah, it's gonna be more than good.
It's incredible to see just how much the world is changing, and in sort of all aspects of technology. So my main reaction is like, wow, what a great time to be in the game.
Amen.
I guess the downside is that it's hard to expect everyone to read them all, right?
Yes.
The one thing I think about is it does describe how all this new knowledge is creating a need for more functional specialists. That we can't expect everyone to know everything. And so the reason why we have movers and painters is to allow them to specialize roles.
Right.
And I think the great breakthrough in Adam Smith's pin factory in the 1700s was that if we can have division of labor, allow specialization, I think it was like a 2 order of magnitude or 3 order of magnitude difference in terms of how many pins you can generate per day.
Yeah.
And so we want specialization, platforms, SREs, metrics, observability. I mean, containers, Kubernetes. This is, no one can read all the documentation in their lifetime.
Sure. Well, that's what the AI is for. Yeah.
So, and I think it just says as technology leaders, our work is getting more difficult,
Yeah.
right? So we're not talking about 2 silos. We're talking about maybe 8 silos, 20 silos. So now you're going to be working with your best friends in data and AI and ML and MLOps.
Yes, we are.
So it is even more challenging and necessary for the leader to create that layer 3 organizational wiring, the social circuitry, so that everyone across all these vast functional specialties can all do their work easily and well and achieve the goal.
My simpler plan is just to add AI to the name of our podcast. I think it'll drive views. We should be good to go then, right? Like I don't need to worry about any of this if I do that. I mean, bad joke, but I love this perspective you have where like we have such an opportunity here, but there are risks, as you point out, because if we fail to think about simplification of organizations, how our organizations are flowing, if we fail to modularize, there's problems that we can
in fact, Patrick Dubois gave a great presentation on day 1, and it was a real life experience report of him trying to bring AI-enabled capabilities to market as the VP of engineering, and it was so fun because it's a fast-moving field. The tools aren't all there yet, and the division of responsibility is not yet well known. And one of the things he talked about was the need for the data people to get way right? It's they need to be seeing what's. It's not just about seeing the measurements and telemetry in production. They have to have better telemetry to see the quality of the answers. Is it toxic? Is it something that we don't want to be displaying? So this is yet another place where we need to close the feedback loop.
Yeah.
And all of it, I found one wildly entertaining because it's so technically challenging. He's so much on the frontier, and yet and it's exposing these other problems that for us to get the benefit of AI, we need to solve. And it's just exciting for me to see this community solving them.
Gene, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I'd love to close. Let's tell folks, where can they find your book?
Oh, yeah. Just Google for Wiring the Winning Organization. In fact, it's available for pre-order at Porchlight. It's actually 30% off, but you can order the book anywhere, pre-order it, and the retailer of your favorite retailer.
Perfect. And I believe it's out November 21st. Is that correct?
I think it's November 7th.
November 7th. Okay, awesome. Well, we are very excited to read it. I'm glad I got an advance copy. It's going to be fantastic. And thanks so much for coming on, Gene. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Oh, my gosh. So good to see you again. And, thank you for this.
Yeah.